Welcome from Wijk aan Zee. Tata Steeel Chess 2025. It's round 3 and I was visiting the tournament today. Had a great time watching the games live. And in this video, I'm going to show you the game of the day. Played between two Indian top stars. Praggnanandhaa playing with the white pieces against Arjun Erigaisi. And it's a very instructive game, so I would like to show you all the ins and outs. And hopefully you will enjoy it. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. And here we go. Praggnanandhaa opens the game against his fellow countryman with the move 1d4. Not a big surprise. Knight f6, c4, e6, knight f3, d5. And here we are again. It's the Catalan opening. Pawn takes c4, bishop g2, c5. Castling kingside, knight c6. And if you have watched my previous video, you may recall this absolutely insane game played in round 1 between world champion Gukesh against Anish Giri, in which Gukesh played in this position the move queen a4. It's one of the various possibilities for white, but Praggnanandhaa goes for the calm move pawn takes c5, opening up the d-file and giving black the chance to swap the queens, which is what happened. Queen takes d1, rook takes d1. Bishop takes c5. Black is up a pawn on c4, but after knight bd2, white is about to regain the pawn. And now you may think, well, this is going to be a boring game. Actually not. In these sort of positions, I really believe in the strength of this bishop on g2, especially if you do compare it with its counterpart on c8. White is always a bit more active in these symmetrical structures, but it's going to be interesting as black is giving back the pawn by playing the move c3. This is all well-known theory. Pawn takes c3, and here you see that white's pawns on the queen side are split. These pawns, they may become vulnerable. On the other hand, having opened up the b-file, white may be able to generate some activity on that part of the board as well. Castling kingside, still very well-known theory. According to my knowledge, knight b3, attacking the bishop, is the main continuation, but the move knight e1 has been seen here as well. If you're new to the game, you may think, why dropping back with a knight? Well, there's a simple idea to reroute the knight to d3, attacking that bishop on c5. And you see that here by moving the knight away from f3, white opens up the diagonal for the bishop. So there is some long-term pressure for white. Bishop d7 was played, trying to complete development, connecting the rooks. And well, if you're slow as black, white may be able to claim an edge, and therefore the move rook to b1 is actually very important. You're attacking the pawn on b7 and you're trying to add more pressure on this diagonal as well. Well, Erigaisi still played pretty fast here, went for the move knight a5. So he's defending the pawn, removing the knight away. But why is this knight well placed at the side of the board? Well, in a number of lines, for instance, if you would take the pawn on b7, there's a problem. This didn't happen in the game for a good reason. Black can take that bishop, and there is bishop a4, and the rook on d1 is in trouble. If you do play knight b3, there is bishop to b6, and all of a sudden that bishop is preventing the rook from getting back into the game. Bishop c6, the rook is almost trapped. Therefore, white should not take the pawn. You don't want to give up that beautiful bishop. Knight b3 was played. It's a much better move. Attacking the knight, attacking the bishop. Knight takes b3, and now pawn takes b3. Very interesting change of structure here, as with the pawns, the structure has been improved now. There's no longer pressure down the b-file, but still there is this idea to attack the pawn on b7. Now, if you do defend with rook a b8, well, there is bishop to f4. So that's not a good way of dealing with that pawn weakness on b7. Bishop c6 was played in the game, but well, I am not sure this is what you would like to do as black, as it does allow the move bishop takes bishop, and after b takes c6, it's actually black who has now these split pawns on the queen side. And I would say this is a very nice little advantage for white. Knight e3, white continues getting his pieces to better squares, attacking the bishop. The bishop goes back to e7. And now it is bishop to e3. And you can see this bishop, even though it doesn't threaten anything yet, it does exert pressure against the pawn on a7. And you know, very soon the rook can come to the a file. You may even consider doubling rooks, and you can feel the weaknesses on a7 and c6. Still, in these sort of positions with limited material, black has very good chances to stay in the game. I would say a move like knight e5 is the way to go to attack the bishop, attack the pawn on c3, and probably with moves like a5, rook fb8, at some point you may be able to initiate some exchanges with something like a4. Looks like black is doing okay there, but instead of knight e5, rook fc8 was played, and frankly speaking, it's not a mistake, but it kind of surprised me. It felt really passive to place that rook on a closed file, defending the pawn on c6, and the pawn is not even attacked at this point. But white has some ideas. Bishop to c5 was played. I really like that idea, as you would like to trade off the bishops so that your knight will get access to the c5 square. Black cannot really avoid the exchange of bishops. You don't want to play bishop d8, it's really passive. So king f8 was played, getting ready to bring the king to the center. But there is a rook to a1. As announced, white is attacking the pawn on a7. Rook c7 was played. And now, there are ideas to double rooks on the a file. Looks like a very constructive way of increasing your advantage. But also the move played by Praggnanandhaa, king f1, it's not such a bad idea. Probably something I would not have prioritized myself, bringing the king to the center. I would have preferred to activate the rooks immediately, but this is fine. It's very difficult for black, if not impossible, to solve these long-term weaknesses. Knight e7 was played, attacking the bishop with a knight, and that means that white's gonna swap on e7. Bishop takes, king takes, and now the rook goes to a3, defending the pawn on b3 if it comes under an attack, and preparing to double. c5, important moment, as black is about to play c4, trading off the c pawn against the b pawn. That's definitely not something white would like to allow. So white played here the move c4, beautiful idea. And I really like that knight on d3. It's a much better knight than the knight on d7. And you see that one of black's pieces will be forced to keep that pawn defended. Rook b7 played. And now it's rook d to a1. Adding more pressure, but okay, pawn on a7. It's still defended, but it also means that black is unable to activate that rook from a8. One interesting line, didn't happen in the game, it's very instructive. If you do play rook ab8, white can simply take on a7. And after swapping everything and taking on b3, there's this cute tactical idea with rook takes d7, as after king takes, it's knight takes c5, king goes away, and you pick up the rook. So black hasn't here any possibilities, doesn't have possibilities here to activate any of his rooks. Therefore, the move a5 was played. That's an interesting moment, as it's basically saying, like, please take that pawn on the a file. White can take the pawn on a5, and after doing so, you allow the capture on b3, but white will win a pawn. But this sort of rook endgame with just a single pawn, it really helps black to break free, can put a king on d6, and actually they're quite good drawing chances. So, interestingly, Praggnanandhaa is not interested in taking the pawn yet. And this is a very important technical plan. Like, he brings the king over to the queen side. So the plan is very simple, that the king is going to end up probably on c3 or on c2 to support that pawn on b3. And later, you would like to take the pawn on a5 as well as the pawn on c5. So you're maintaining maximum pressure here. Now, objectively, black should probably be okay. If you put a rook on a7, for instance, let's say you go rook a7, and maybe you bring the king to d6, and maybe there are ideas to go knight b8, knight c6. The knight is a good defender of the pawn on a5. I think something like that should be considered by black. However, king d6 was played, also very understandable. But now there is this move, knight to c1. Absolutely amazing idea. The knight is no longer needed on d3, and it's looking for a new way to add pressure to black's position. As after rook a7, very important, yeah, the knight is defending the pawn, so black has to defend the pawn on a5. The knight comes to a2, and after king c6, the knight comes in to c3, and there are plans to bring the knight to b5. Knight b6, still everything looks like it's well covered, but white has managed to create some sort of a blockade on the queen side. Black is unable to play a move like a4. His rooks are pretty passive, and therefore white is trying to broaden the battlefield to the king side. With a move like f4, may not be obvious what white is trying to accomplish here, but grabbing space is usually very useful. Knight c8 was played, and here knight b5. Attacking the rook on a7, rook a6. You got to stay on the a file to defend the pawn. And here it is, rook to d1. And you see that there are plans to get the rook over to d8, for instance. Knight b6 was played. And now you may think, okay, the rook can enter on d6. But okay, it's not that simple. It should be said that after something like rook d6, king b7, the knight is controlling the entry square on d7. And black is about to play a4 and remove that weakness on the a file. So white has to be patient. Rook a2 was played. That's a very nice subtle move with possibilities now to double rooks and enter via that d file. If you ever play a4, there is this plan to go rook back to a1 with maximum pressure. The a pawn is pinned, so that may lead to some problems for black. Instead of a4, rook f8 was played. Remarkable move, but you're sort of protecting the pawn, even though it's not under an attack. Rook d6, check, king to b7. And well, if you move the rook away from a2, let's say rook d2, black is about to play a4. So, again, patience. Knight c3. The knight has done its job. It helped the rook to come to d6, and with the knight on c3, white is preventing black from playing the move a5, a4. Rook back to a8, connecting the rooks, and hopefully black can take away some pressure by offering the exchange of rooks at some point. Rook 82 was played, but remarkable moment because things are not that simple. It does give black the possibility here to play the move a4. And it was not played in the game. I'm not really sure what went through Arjun Erigaisi's mind, but after something like knight takes, rook d7, okay, the king can go back. You can take on a4. White is better. White is pressing in this double rook endgame, but black is still fighting here. So not sure why Erigaisi didn't go for this line. He played the move rook fc8. He wanted to keep that pawn defended, possibly put a rook on c7 whenever needed. Rook a2 back. A lot of maneuvering here in time trouble. Rook f8. Rook d1. Rook is going back. Rook a7. Rook da1. And black is going back with his own rook as well. But the situation has changed. The pawn is defended, but the knight is coming back to b5. It's attacking the rook. Rook has only one square. Rook a6. And now the knight comes in with check. It's a knight fork. And white is winning a pawn. And not just a random pawn, guys. Because winning the pawn on f7 means that the king side structure also has become much more vulnerable. Knight e7 was played. And the knight is coming back. As I said, there are weaknesses all over the place. Knight f6 was played. Defending the pawn on h7. The knight is coming back to f3. You're not in a rush. And still there are weaknesses. So this is a technically winning position. But how to convert it? Let's have a look. Black played knight e4. Trying to stay active. Knight e2. And of course you would like to exchange the knights. The more pieces are coming off the board, the easier it will be for white to convert. Black is not going to cooperate. Knight f6 played. But now king f2. The king is also joining the game. Knight g4, forking, pawn and king. The king goes to g2, why not? e5, very good technique by Erigaisi. He's trying to swap his weak pawn, but there's another problem. Knight e4, attacking that pawn on c5. Pawn takes f4, g takes f4, and well, pawn is still hanging. You cannot use your rook for that because it allows rook takes a5. If you defend with your king, there may follow rook to d2, and the rook infiltrates. This is looking very good for white. So rook e8 was played, hoping to get in some counterplay, but it is another pawn, pawn number 2, and white's even attacking the rook. Rook c6 played. And well, you may consider taking on a5, leading to some complications as you have to work out the lines after rook takes e2. It's probably good for white, but it's understandable that in a technically winning position, you don't want to give your opponent a chance to fight back into the game. Knight e3 is a move which really appeals to me as well. It's a very nice second pawn. Rook g6 played. Of course, there are ideas for discovered check against the king. But white played just h3. Very nice, calm-blooded move. You are just chasing the knight. The knight got to go somewhere. There's no good discovered check. If you do play knight e5, you can play king f2 and the knight on d3 is protected. So everything is fine there. Instead of knight e5, knight e3 was played. Double check. But the king goes to f2. I really like this move. There are even plans now to go knight e5 to attack the rook, disconnect the rook from defending the knight on e3. That's a huge threat. Rook g2 is even allowed, but still there is king f3. And well, there are plans, as I said. Knight e5 is still an idea as black has difficulties maintaining that knight on e3. Rook h2 was played, attacking the pawn on h3. But now it is knight to f2. That's a beautiful move. You're defending the pawn, and the rook on h2 is out of play. g5 played. This is a tricky idea. Maybe black is heading for ideas to open up the f-file and try to create counterplay against the king. But you can simply take the pawn on a5. Ignore black's last move. Pawn takes f4 played. What else? But now the white's rooks are super active. Rook check is played. If you go back to the back rank, there will always be a check. And that's not going to be good for black at all. King d6 played. And now the knight comes back to e4. Nice move. It's check. King goes to e6. Now rook 1 to a6 with check. And well, where should the king go to? If you go to f5, there's this beautiful line with rook f6, king e5, rook a5 check. And after king d4, it's going to be rook d6 with checkmate. That's a beautiful idea. Therefore, king f5 is not a good move. King e5 was played, but that runs into a similar problem. There is rook a5. And well, black's position is just completely falling apart. Erigaisi played here the move king to d4. But well, that runs into a similar motive as we have seen already before. Rook d7 with check. King is caught in a beautiful mating net with the help of the knight and the other rook and the pawn on c4. Here, Erigaisi resigned. Very nice technical performance, giving Praggnanandhaa a very important second victory in this event. He's on 2.5 out of 3. He's taking the shared lead with Nodibek Abdusatorov. The two played already against each other in round 1. It was a very spectacular game. Actually, maybe I will cover it at some point, maybe not. Depends on what's going to happen in the coming days. So much action here in Wijk aan Zee. I'll keep you informed, and I hope to see you back very soon again. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.